It's unbelievable how one person's actions can cause such widespread consequences. Donald Trump's recent comments have ignited a firestorm of anger and resentment, particularly in Latin America. His careless remarks have fueled protests across the region, with Panama being the focal point of one of the most intense uprisings. People are now taking to the streets, sending a clear message to the United States. Donald Trump's words have not only insulted them, but have put their sovereignty into question. Outside the U.S. Embassy in Panama City, images of Trump are being burned, and signs reading "F. Donald Trump" are being held up by citizens who feel disrespected by the threat of an American takeover. The protests erupted after Trump's remarks about taking control of the Panama Canal, a statement that has only exacerbated tensions between the two countries. Union members, workers, and citizens have united in opposition, with some even going so far as to burn U.S. flags in the streets. The message is loud and clear: Panama's sovereignty will not be compromised. What's even more concerning is that these protests are being used as a tool in global propaganda. China and Russia, who have long criticized U.S. foreign policy, are now using the growing unrest in Panama as evidence of American imperialism. Their media outlets are pushing the narrative that the United States is trying to conquer Panama and control its vital infrastructure. This is being used to undermine America's influence in the region, especially as countries like Brazil, South Africa, and India are increasingly aligning themselves with the BRICS bloc, strengthening ties with Russia and China. In a stunning move, even Mexico's President, Claudia Sheinbaum, has voiced her opposition to Trump's actions. She's publicly criticized his policies, calling for respect for the sovereignty of all nations, including those in Latin America. At a recent G20 summit, Sheinbaum was even photographed with Chinese President Xi Jinping, a symbolic moment that speaks volumes about the shifting alliances in the face of Trump's foreign policy. In Russia, state-run media outlets like Sputnik have reported extensively on the protests in Panama, with headlines that condemn U.S. imperialism. The rhetoric is clear. Panama, like other nations, deserves to remain free from foreign interference. As countries around the world watch, it's becoming increasingly apparent that Trump's actions are isolating the United States from its allies and emboldening its adversaries. And it's not just foreign leaders who are speaking out. In Canada, there's growing anger at Trump's behavior. Politicians and citizens alike are standing up, saying they will no longer tolerate being bullied by a leader who seems to only act out of self-interest. As one Canadian MP put it, "We're not afraid of you, Donald. We will work with you. But don't push us around." Canadians are ready to stand their ground, and they're not backing down from Trump's reckless rhetoric. As the situation unfolds, it's clear that Trump's actions are alienating the United States on the world stage. His comments are not just inflammatory, they're dangerous, and they're pushing the U.S. further away from its global allies. Instead of strengthening America's position, Trump is opening the door for countries like China and Russia to capitalize on the growing dissatisfaction with U.S. foreign policy. The world is watching closely as this crisis continues to unfold, and it's clear that America's standing in the international community is at stake. With tensions running high and protests intensifying, it's a reminder of how one person's words can ignite a global firestorm. Trump's rhetoric has already created a ripple effect that is shaking the foundations of international relations, and it's anyone's guess how far this will go. But one thing is certain: the world is no longer just watching, it's responding, and the consequences of Trump's actions are playing out in real time. If you want to stay up to date on this evolving story and the latest breaking news, make sure to hit subscribe. Keep yourself informed on the developments that matter most, and join the conversation about how global politics are shifting under Trump's influence. The world is witnessing the unraveling of America's diplomatic efforts, as Trump's reckless approach is leaving an indelible mark on international relations. With protests raging across Latin America, the damage to the U.S.'s reputation is only intensifying. Trump's statements about invading Panama and threatening to take over the Panama Canal have triggered a wave of indignation that stretches far beyond the borders of Panama itself. The people of Panama, once a close ally of the U.S., are now standing firm in opposition, fighting for their autonomy and resisting any form of imperial control. This anger has spread like wildfire, fueling tensions across the entire region. What was once a stable partnership between the U.S. and many Latin American countries is now being shattered, all because of a few reckless words. The impact of these protests in Panama isn't just being felt locally, it's being amplified by global powers looking to exploit the division. As China and Russia watch from the sidelines, their propaganda machines are working overtime, pushing the narrative of American imperialism to further isolate the United States on the world stage. They see this as an opportunity to capitalize on the growing dissatisfaction with the U.S. and expand their influence in a region that was once firmly under American sway. As the situation unfolds, more and more countries are aligning themselves with these global superpowers, offering a stark contrast to Trump's isolationist policies. The image of a unified Latin America standing up against U.S. interference is being strategically showcased by adversaries like Russia and China, reinforcing their own agendas while simultaneously weakening the global influence of the U.S. The Panama protests are just the beginning of what could be a much larger shift in global alliances. This isn't just about one protest in Panama. It's a reflection of the broader trends that are unfolding. Leaders across Latin America are beginning to take a stand, and they're showing no hesitation in distancing themselves from the U.S. The push for sovereignty and independence is growing stronger, and Trump's policies are only fueling this desire for self-determination. Even Canada, America's neighbor and longtime ally, is beginning to push back against Trump's aggressive and erratic approach to foreign policy. In the face of Trump's divisive rhetoric, Canadian leaders are reaffirming their commitment to their own interests and standing firm against any further disrespect from the U.S. The idea that Trump can push around his neighbors and allies is being met with firm resistance, and Canada is making it clear that they won't back down. The consequences of Trump's words are being felt in real time, and it's becoming increasingly clear that this is more than just a diplomatic crisis. It's a global reckoning. The alliances that America once relied upon are fraying, and the trust that once held these relationships together is quickly eroding. The question now is how far this will go, and how much longer the U.S. can maintain its position as a global leader when its allies are no longer standing by its side. As the world turns its attention to Panama and the growing protests, it's important to recognize the long-term implications of what's unfolding. These protests represent more than just a response to one man's words. They're a symbol of the global pushback against a vision of American dominance that no longer resonates with many nations around the world. The ripple effect of Trump's actions is being felt in countries across the globe, and the future of international relations is now in question. So while Trump may continue to make bold statements on social media and make threats to other nations, the reality is that his approach is only isolating the U.S. further. The global community is beginning to unite in opposition to his actions, and it's clear that this is only the beginning. The damage may already be done, but the world is standing up, and it's time for the U.S. to take a hard look at the consequences of its actions on the international stage. If you want to stay informed about the unfolding situation and how it's impacting global relations, make sure to subscribe and stay up to date with all the latest developments. The global landscape is changing, and it's crucial to understand the impact these events are having on our world. Stay tuned for more, as this story continues to evolve and shape the future of international politics. If you want to stay informed on how this story is developing and what it means for the future of global diplomacy, be sure to subscribe and keep up with the latest updates. The world is changing, and America's place in it is shifting dramatically. It's crucial to understand the global impact of these events, and we'll continue to bring you the latest breaking news and analysis as this crisis unfolds. Stay tuned for more updates on the shifting balance of global power. As the world watches the unfolding crisis, it's becoming painfully clear that Trump's foreign policy decisions are causing irreparable damage to America's global standing. What started as a series of reckless statements is now snowballing into a full-scale diplomatic disaster. Nations that once viewed the U.S. as an ally are reconsidering their positions, realizing that a leader who alienates his own allies is a liability on the world stage. And as the rest of the world turns its back, China and Russia are poised to seize the opportunity to reshape the global order in their favor. The protests in Panama are just a microcosm of a larger trend. They're not simply about Panama's sovereignty, they're about the shifting tides in global power. Every day, more countries are realizing that the U.S. is no longer the steadfast leader they once trusted. The damage done by Trump's policies is reverberating across the globe, and no amount of bravado or empty threats will change the fact that America is losing its grip on international diplomacy. It's important to recognize that this shift isn't just about Trump. It's about the long-term consequences of his actions. The alliances that were once the foundation of American foreign policy are starting to crumble. And as America's influence wanes, countries are looking for new partners to secure their futures. China and Russia are more than happy to step in, offering their own vision of global cooperation, one that doesn't come with the baggage of American imperialism or divisive rhetoric. The rest of the world is waking up to the fact that they have options, and they're increasingly turning to these alternative powers. The diplomatic isolation of the U.S. has far-reaching implications, not just for Trump, but for future administrations. The global community is now questioning America's commitment to the values it once championed, such as democracy, sovereignty, and peaceful diplomacy. Countries are starting to realize that they can no longer rely on a U.S. that is increasingly focused on its own interests and indifferent to the needs of others. This shift is not just about Latin America or Europe, it's a global shift. Countries that have long aligned themselves with the U.S. are starting to distance themselves, and others are quietly watching, ready to make their own decisions about where they stand. The rise of China and Russia is no longer a distant possibility. It's happening now, and the U.S. is at risk of being left behind. As the international community recalibrates, the question remains: how will the United States respond to this growing isolation? Will it double down on its confrontational rhetoric, or will it attempt to rebuild the relationships it's so carelessly torn apart? The road ahead is uncertain, but one thing is clear: Trump's actions have left a lasting scar on the global diplomatic landscape. If you want to stay informed about how this story develops and what it means for the future of global diplomacy, make sure to hit that subscribe button. This crisis is far from over, and it's crucial to understand how the shifting dynamics of global power will impact the world in the coming years. Stay up to date on the latest breaking news and analysis, and don't miss out on the updates that could shape the future of international relations. Like and subscribe for more coverage of this unfolding story.